I'm U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy, and this is The Elephant in the Room.
And do you have any gastroenterology jokes? Because I know you were a doctor.
Of course you do. But you kind of roll those in as the time comes by.
Okay. Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. I'm your host, Cyrus Pearson.
I'm your co-host, Sophie Delquier.
Sophie, I have a soft spot for the state that our senator is from today. Did you know that?
No,
Louisiana?
I didn't. Why?
I got married in New Orleans.
Wow.
Yes, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Why'd you guys choose that?
I mean, it's a long backstory, but...
Well, let's make this about you. Go ahead.
Let's not do that. Anyway, we did get married at Brennan's, where they invented Bananas Foster, a famous dessert that they served at the wedding. And my best friend got married down the street at Napoleon House, and I officiated that wedding.
No way.
Yes.
Look at you. That's interesting.
So what do you think about Louisiana?
I have never been to Louisiana.
Have you not been?
No. I do want to visit New Orleans. I've heard great things.
You have to go, and you have to eat the food. It's amazing.
Okay. Sold.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay.
Let's hear from our senator for today, Dr. and Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. Dr. Bill Cassidy from the great state of Louisiana, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I'm glad to be with y'all. Thank you for having me.
You know, something I've noticed, we kind of start off a little light with these. I've noticed you're kind of musical. You're always humming something or singing something, and you did that today, too, when you came in here.
Yeah, doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you.
See?
So like I'm probably like the most unmusical person, except I like to hum and I like to sing, which, as you might guess, drives my family crazy. Both because they're musically oriented, they actually like the stuff, and secondly, because I can't carry a tune.
Now, do you listen to any specific genres of music? I know in New Orleans, it's just amazing music down there.
It is amazing music, but actually, I like Spanish classical guitar, and I like that because I study Spanish. I love the language, and I love the culture, and so for whatever reason, when I just like to listen to Spanish classical, and it just kind of makes me feel like I might be in Sevilla.
Super cool.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. So do you speak a little bit of Spanish?
I do speak Spanish, and I read my Bible in Spanish. I keep a journal in Spanish, and I just try to work it. You know, there was a past prime minister of Spain who, as an adult, became fluent in English, and I think about him because it inspires me. He said he would just choose to read English, not Spanish, because of course he can read Spanish. So I just do that. I listen to Harry Potter in Spanish, when I'm walking the dogs. So just a little bit, poco a poco.
I love it.
Yeah, and a little preview, we're going to get to something called the Americas Act a little later. But before we get into this stuff, let's talk about you as a doctor. And kind of cool here, you became ranking member of the HELP Committee, which stands for the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. You're the first physician to occupy this role since 1933. Very impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm often asked, why does a doctor go into politics? And of course, my tongue-in-cheek is that when every morning you wake up and do colonoscopies, you get tired of the view.
There we go.
And so,
there we go.
So it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it kind of catches as kind of a little bit of truth that you just want to try and do something different. You're very good at what you do. You enjoy doing what you do. It's rewarding. But on the other hand, you've been doing it for a long time, and but on the other hand, to be involved in healthcare policy is to continue to use the insights that I gained working as a doctor, and I worked in a doctor for a hospital for the uninsured and the underinsured. So my patients were basically poor. And so to be able to take that knowledge you got from working over 2 decades with patients in a setting like that and apply it to our nation's problems, it's just, I like to say, it's practicing medicine by other means.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that as an aside because I think it's a really cool tidbit. But let's talk a little bit about the charity hospital system that you were working in. Tell us about that. You got some great stories. I know that. So why don't you just go ahead and take it?
Yeah, it was founded by Huey Long way back when as a hospital for the uninsured, I guess, and taking over a hospital that was run by the Sisters of Charity out of New Orleans. Orleans. And so the one in New Orleans was called Charity Hospital. And then they spread across the state. And it was a teaching hospital for LSU Medical School. So I would teach, and the way you teach in medicine is you either give lectures or you teach at the bedside. Let's examine the patient, see if you can feel the liver, for example. A couple things about that. I smile because I'm famous for my lectures on diarrhea and hepatitis. And so I'll be at a party and somebody will walk up to me about 20 years younger and goes, I still remember hepatitis because of you. So my epitaph will say he gave such a good lecture. The other thing, I had two different doctors on the campaign trail. There was one time when we were in the ICU and a patient went into ventricular tachycardia, which you'll see on a doctor show, and it's instead of the normal kind of up and down, it goes boom, 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 and it's a prelude to death. And I was sitting there, and we're all in rounds, and I reached over and I thumped his chest. And he goes back to the normal sinus rhythm. And those students were so impressed. I was just like, whoa. And so 30 years later, I ran into one of them, or 20 years later, ran into one of them on the campaign trail who still remembered that. So you have those little tidbits. Another guy who the first time he ever felt the liver was how I instructed him how to feel the liver. It's very rewarding as a teacher, extremely rewarding. But it also allows people to spread the word that here's something who's done something meaningful in his life before politics.
And did that influence your politics at all?
Did what influence? My teaching?
Yeah, working in that hospital.
Oh, of course.
Okay, how so?
Well, first you recognize that when a patient got good insurance and they're able to leave the charity hospital where, despite all our hard work, they still had to wait 2 hours to see a doctor, and the tests were not the same as in the private hospital. If they got private insurance, then their life went up. They got better. So then, by the way, you couldn't help but notice that when the business community is humming, they're more likely to get that job, which gives them the private insurance. So if you're really concerned about my patients in the hospital for the uninsured, you really, at the best, you wanted them to get more money, to have better benefits, and to move up in the world and probably cease to be your patient because they go someplace else where they have more options. Now, by the way, which party is more pro-business? Which party is more likely to put in a system in which somebody is going to make a little bit more money and have better benefits in order to have a better lifestyle? And it's the Republican Party. That was part of my political evolution to become a really committed conservative. Now, and how did this come to pass? If you look at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act bill, which was just before the COVID pandemic, it was the best economy in, I think, any living person's lifetime. We had record low unemployment, no inflation, very different from now, and the wage growth was disproportionately in the lower two quintiles of our American society.
Right.
Those were my patients. And I kept thinking to myself, all my patients who I would be seeing because they're uninsured, many of them now have insurance, they're making more money, and they've got a better life. And that was a part because of what the Tax Cut and Jobs Act bill helped create.
Very cool.
Well, Senator, this is something that one would say might kind of run in the family. Your wife was also a retired breast cancer surgeon, and you met in you're doing your residency together. Is that right?
No. We I was doing residency with her old boyfriend.
Okay, here's the story.
Give us the real story.
But she was doing her residency at another hospital. She was at Harbor UCLA, and I was at LA County USC. And we met through a Bible study. And she's from Mobile. I'm from Baton Rouge. And so she said she had to go to the West Coast to meet a Southerner. And so we married. She had finished her general surgery residency about the same time I finished my internal medicine, gastroenterology, liver disease specialty. We stayed in LA for a year or two, and then we moved back home. And we moved back home. She just, I think women have a better sense of where they want to raise their kids than do men. And she wanted to raise our children, your cousins. And so we moved back to Baton Rouge, and it's been fantastic.
Hey, can I ask a practical question here? As a gastroenterologist, is there something that people should be doing that they're not doing? Is there any advice the gastroenterology community wants to let people know about?
Oh, man, that's a lot of advice. Tell me what your problem is.
Are we not drinking enough water? Are we not taking care of our livers?
Well, everybody
Too
should.
much wine.
Everybody should be moderate in terms of their intake of alcohol. If you drink, be moderate. A drink a day would probably be enough.
Cyrus.
And then eat lots of fiber. For women, it's 20 grams a day. For men, it's 30 to 40, depending upon recommendations you eat. Fiber is how God created us to eat. And if you eat a lot of fiber, you're eating less processed food, you're eating less red beef, etc. A good steak is good, but you just want to balance it with a lot of fiber. My family likes Dave's bread.
We love that in our household as well.
Yeah, 5 grams per big piece of bread.
Yeah, we love it.
So anyway, and so that will help a whole lot of, and I could give you a whole lot of GI stuff right now. The guy that invented fiber, the concept of fiber, I'll tell you this, then I'll stop. I'm back teaching medical students again.
Yay.
It's interesting.
A guy named, I forget Dr. Burkett's first name, but Burkett, very famous. He was a missionary in Africa. And he noticed that his patients in Africa had never got diverticulosis, never got appendicitis, and they had big, voluminous stools. Now, to be a doctor, you got to be a little earthy, and stools are about as earthy as you can get. And then he thought about his patients in London who had these kind of pencil-thin stools and had a lot of diverticulosis, a lot of appendicitis. And so he had a patient, a friend or friends swallow a prune seed in London and had the patients in Africa swallow prune seeds, and he watched their transit time. And the Africans would kick out the prune speed like in 1 to 2 to 3 days max, and like you could carbon date the stool and the people in London.
Really?
It took him forever to pass the stool.
Oh, wow.
So he's the one that came up with the concept that fiber will increase the amount of moisture retained in your stool, which will increase the bulk, which will give you faster transit time, which decreases colon cancer, appendicitis, diverticulosis, probably breast cancer, lowers your cholesterol, therefore your risk of heart disease. Fiber, God made us to eat a lot of fiber.
Well, there are some doctors now that I like to listen to, and I see on Twitter, and Dr. Rhonda Patrick is a big one that I really like to listen to. She advocates for gut health so much, and she says that pretty much anything in the body can be, kind of directed back to the gut. I mean, even mental health issues. So
what's your take on that,
It's
Doctor?
important.
Well, it depends on, in one sense, absolutely. There's something called the microbiome in your colon. And the microbiome, for some people, makes them more likely to retain calories than other people, therefore more likely to become obese. And if you look at your diet and what you eat and your gut as contributing to obesity, obesity can absolutely have a contribution to mental health issues. If you don't sleep well, you're just going to... St. Paul described sleeplessness as one of the tortures he had undergone. When the Russians would torture Catholic bishops, they would not let them sleep for like 7 days in a row. So poor sleep can really disrupt a lot of things, and including making you more likely to become more obese. So ultimately, you are what you eat.
Yeah.
Let me change the subject here. I think we've got a lot on that, and I'm actually happy to have gotten it.
Change the subject. That's almost a pun.
You seem like a solutions-based guy, and you helped to found a charter school. Can you go into that story? That's another cool story. I think you got a ton of cool stories. Can you tell us that one?
Yeah, well, actually, I helped I was there as my wife founded it. Let me give credit where credit is due.
Okay.
My youngest child is dyslexic. Severely dyslexic. And so we didn't know anything about dyslexia. And so she was just not learning. And it was just incredible. And here you are.
What grades are we talking?
Like the beginning. She couldn't learn to read.
Gotcha.
And my older two children did very well in school. And so we didn't quite understand this. And so here you have two highly educated parents, and they're just totally at loss as to what to do.
Yeah.
So it was really pretty interesting. There was Pete Stark is a former congressman from California. and he was sponsoring. So my wife heard about dyslexia, started getting my daughter into some stuff with dyslexia, and then Pete's wife, they had triplets, I think, or twins. And they had identified as dyslexic, and there was a couple from Yale Med School coming down to speak to Congress and to spouses about dyslexia, and Pete Stark's wife had arranged this. So my wife said, should I go to that? And I said, yeah, you should go to it. And she goes, you sure? Because no, you need to go. And so she went. That's when she began to really learn about dyslexia. Met a couple called Dr. and Dr. Shaywitz from Yale, who literally have written the book on dyslexia. And so that triggered a series of events. Now my wife has 3 public charter schools for children with dyslexia, and has a goal to continue to expand, including into a high school. Right now it's all primary. And the point being, if your child has dyslexia, then you can pay the tuition. You can have your child's problem fixed. But if you can't afford that tuition, you're stuck. And so if you're in Section 8 housing, or if you're just a working class family and you got 3 kids and 2 are dyslexic, and you can't afford $20,000 to $50,000 a year in tuition for each child, you're stuck. And so Laura started this public charter school in Baton Rouge first, and it co-founded and subsequently expanded, in which now you can use the voucher from the state to come and get your child educated.
That's awesome.
And so we have, of course, kids who are less well off, but we have the children of physicians and business people, for example. And so it's really a spectrum of kids, but they're all getting that care they need. And the Shaywitzes, the couple they met from Yale long ago, are on her board and really have given her a lot of guidance how to implement this program.
What I mean, I don't need you to, I guess, go into extreme detail, but if there is a parent that has a child with dyslexia and they're going to send them to a school, what's different about that school that they're getting out of it?
First, you have to recognize what is the definition of dyslexia.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, intelligence and reading ability track very closely. Very closely. But here you'll have a child who is very bright, but just can't read. And of course, it's humiliating. They'll ask him to stand up in first grade and to read, and the child can't read. And children being children will humiliate the child. If it's a little boy, he begins to act out. If it's a little girl, she often kind of folds within herself. And it's tragic, and they cry when they go to school because they don't want to be ridiculed. So first you have that definition. You can have your child evaluated, and if your child has dyslexia, there's objective ways to establish this. They go to one of the schools which would have smaller class sizes. It would have a different way to learn reading, and ideally every class reinforces reading. So in math, they're not only working upon math, but they'll be working upon reading. And so you're in that environment. There's also, for example, dyslexics take longer to read, takes longer to process the word, so they can get more time on their test. Now, if you don't know the material, more time does not give you a better grade. If you're dyslexic and you have more time to decipher, discern, then you do get a better grade.
Interesting.
And so there can be an accommodation for the testing. I could keep going, but...
It's interesting.
No, it's spectacular. I think that's amazing. I can keep going, Sophie, unless you want to...
No, carry on.
Okay, well, excuse me, guys.
I think there's something that the senator is eager to talk about, which is his big push on Social Security.
Okay. Well, can we get to that in a second?
No, Cyrus.
Well, you told us why you became a Republican. Can you tell us why you got started in politics?
Yeah, I tell folks, you're 48 years old, you love what you do, but you're really bored. And so, and again, going back to waking up and seeing the same view every morning.
Okay.
And just when I thought, well, I'm 48 years old, and I do think sometimes God gives us discontentment to kind of kick us out of a comfort zone. And we want to channel that discontentment positively, not negatively. But still, it moves you out of a comfort zone. And I just felt so discontented. And my wife could see I was not happy. And so she was incredibly supportive. But just when I thought I'd be too old to run for office, at some point you're just too old. At least in my mind I would. Somebody leaned back and said, would you want to run for state senate? And because a spot special election had just opened. And that kind of triggered a sequence of events, and very positive. So just when I thought, in fact, just when I reconciled myself that I wasn't going to have the opportunity opened. And sometimes that's the way it happens. So it's pretty cool.
Well, as Sophie alluded to, Social Security is something that's a big topic to you. Our listeners do tend to skew younger, so good luck getting them interested in this. But what is it with Social Security? What is the problem?
Hey, listener, if you're concerned about the nation's deficit, unless you want your grandmother or your great-grandmother living with you, ears perk up. Let me just tell you that.
There you go.
Right now, Social Security is going insolvent in 8 years. And I'm trying to do a visual here. You can't really see it. Okay, so we've got a lot of money going out, and we got relatively small amount of money coming in to pay for all that money going out in benefits. There's a big trust fund in the middle, which is supplementing the money coming in order to make the payments for the promised benefits. But that trust fund in 8 years will be empty, at which point the amount of money going out by law adjusts to the amount of money going in, and there'll be a 24% cut in benefits for those who are currently receiving Social Security. Now, if you're younger, you're thinking, well, that's a long ways off. But it will double poverty among the elderly. And a lot of folks think, well, we won't cut those benefits. We'll just borrow the money. If we borrow the money, it'll add 560 trillion with a T, trillion, $560 trillion to our nation's indebtedness over the next 75 years, and that doesn't include the indebtedness for Medicare, for Medicaid, and for other stuff. So if you love our country, and if you want to have a lot of revenue for you to fulfill your vision of what our country should be, and not just paying back debt service, we need to fix social. The good news is we got a plan to fix social. And our plan is to do exactly what you probably are doing in your 401k, which is to create a fund separate from social and then invest it in the strength of the American economy. It's just what your 401k does. It puts it in the stock market, into real estate, you name it. It's what people around the world do. They invest in the U.S. stock market. Social Security is like the only pension fund that does not invest in the U.S. economy, except in the form of treasuries, which is about the worst investment you could ever have in a period of time of high inflation. So all that to say, we've got a big idea. It fixes about to 75% of the problem. We also could do some other stuff. We create work incentives. We have some anti-poverty provisions. We have some other stuff that makes the program work better so that when, believe it or not, you'll get there one day, the program will be better for you. And by the way, we think we can evergreen it so that no future generation has to worry about social. Now we just need a president who will actually step up to the plate and work with us. We got Republican and Democratic senators, Republican and Democratic House members, but President Biden turned his back on a solution. And frankly, President Trump, he has turned his back on solutions as well. We need a president who's willing to lead, a leader who wants to lead and help us go all the way.
Well, we'll hear more about this in the future. Let's try to fit in a few more topics here. The Americas Act, which I talked about earlier, doesn't sound like much if you don't know, but it's not just the United States of America. If you're in South America, that's America. If you're in Central America, that's America. Tell us about the Americas Act.
Okay, you say your audience skews younger. The
Typically.
future of the United States is going to be Western Hemispheric. So,
okay.
Now, right now, the last, 30, 40 to 50 years has been Asian-focused. Before that, it was European-focused. I think in the next 50 years, it'll be Western Hemispheric focused. Why do I say that? If you look at Canada and Mexico is, I think, now our largest trading partner.
Okay.
As companies are pulling out of Asia, they are relocating to the Americas. Now, we got a lot of problems here. We got illegal immigration coming across our border. How do we stop it? We got to strengthen the border, but we got to give people a reason to stay in their home country. Now, so if we can pull those businesses out of Asia, and some of them have a labor cost that needs a lower cost labor market, let's relocate them to Central and South America so that somebody has a job and they're less likely to leave their home and come here. There's precedent for that, by the way. We were down to net zero migration from Mexico because enough industry has been created in Mexico, despite the warlords tearing up the country. people stay where they have a job. Now, if we can do the same thing for Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and Colombia and Venezuela, etc., they become more prosperous. Why is that important? Mexico spends about 60% of everything we buy from Mexico. 60% of it comes back to us. That's good for us. About 10 to 15% of what we spend in China comes back to us. So the more we invest in the Western Hemisphere, the more it becomes a virtuous cycle, creating opportunity for Americans, not just keeping the Guatemalan in Guatemala because she now has a job, but creating more jobs in the United States because that money's flowing back to us. So we've got lots of things in the Americas Act, but bottom line, we think it increases prosperity for the United States, helps to address root causes of migration, and helps create a more prosperous Western Hemisphere, which goes back to creating a more prosperous United States.
And it sounds like it also moves away from dependence on China a little bit.
It does. It starts to liberate us a little bit. You know, I'm a doc, so most of our antibiotics, penicillins and cephalosporins, are made in China. Now, if we go to a hot war with China, we lose those antibiotics. You just can't. You need antibiotics for a modern society. Just one example of a critical medicine, but it could be any other product, that right now we're overly dependent upon China. Right now, we're dependent upon China to process the critical minerals that are often kind of mined or extracted elsewhere in the world. They go back to China. That puts a supply chain for those critical minerals. If China invades Taiwan, we'll lose access to about 40% of our computer chips. Now, we're trying to address that with the CHIPS Act, but the point being is that there is a vulnerability to supply chain that is currently in China. I'm not for complete decoupling, but China's a frenemy. We need to emphasize the not the enemy, but we can't be naive about the enemy.
Yeah.
In which case, we need to have some sort of resilience should they decide they want to shut things down.
Time for one more thing from you, Sophie.
Well, Senator, you said that Biden turned his back on the American people, and there's one more thing I want to talk about with that. Biden has clearly declared a war on American energy. Louisiana is a big energy state. Lots of energy jobs in Louisiana. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's impacting Louisiana and your thoughts there?
Well, I think it's how it's impacting the nation. The wonderful thing about being energy independent, it creates hundreds of thousands of jobs in the United States, not just in a state like Louisiana, but across the nation. Colorado, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Pennsylvania, I could keep going, Ohio. It creates lots of jobs. It holds down the cost of fuel and utilities. High cost for your fuels and utilities is a regressive tax upon working families. They're going to spend a higher percent of their income to fill up the gas tank, to heat their home. And so now, if we can do, for example, offshore wind affordably, I'm all for offshore wind. But the kilowatt hour from offshore wind is much more expensive than that which would come from natural gas. Now, if you're well off, oh my gosh, if you're well off, you can afford it. You take it in stride, no big deal. But, I go back to those patients I treated in my hospital for the uninsured. If they are paying 15% more, they got 15% less to pay on food. It's really that kind of marginal thing. The Republican Party is the party which its policies show greater concern for the poor. We're not quite as much into enhancing the safety net, but I would argue, that, although we believe in a safety net, but I would argue that the way that the Democrats have done it, it becomes like flypaper, that somebody sticks to dependency as opposed to what Republicans do is bounce you to your feet. And we should be about bouncing people to their feet to achieve their highest potential. And as they achieve that highest potential, they not only create opportunity for themselves, for our country, but for every future generation in their family. That goes back to why I think Republicans have the best policies.
Doctor, Senator, your staff is literally hovering. We've got to let you go. We didn't even get a chance to touch on the food in Louisiana, which I think is some of the most outstanding in the nation.
I will say, though, that was a great way to end, and I love that analogy. I'm definitely going to use that in the future.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it is good.
It is good.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Yes, Senator, thank you for being today's The Elephant in the Room. If you'd like to hear more conversations like these, please like or subscribe, and the app will notify you next time it comes out. The Elephant in the Room is brought to you under the direction of U.S. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, also a doctor. Executive producer is Arjun Modi. Carly Rapp and Elena Seiler get things done behind the scenes. And until next time, this is The elephant in the room.
Don't know.